Hi, everyone. Welcome to our latest edition of SuperNova Commencements. I'm your host, Kashi, Sehgal, and we have an awesome show. I know I say that every week, but it's true. We have really good shows because we have really great guests. And today is no different. So today we're going to jump right into our Career Powered by Data segment by our partners, Steppingblocks. Like I tell you every week, they have 100 million people worth of data, and it's all career data. So you can really figure out whatever you need to know about your career and like what skills you need. Today, our guest has done so many different things, but we're going to focus, his current role is in management consulting. So we're going to take that and use that as our career for today. So the most common education background for management consulting is a degree in accounting or business administration. There are about 785,000 people in the US in consulting, and it's on average about 40 years old that the professional that's in this career. So a little older than some of the careers that we've seen. It's 52% women in the career and 3% veteran. So that's cool. Top skills. So you want to hone these skills. So leadership, management, strategic planning, the skills that make the most, business transformation, management consulting, and financial modeling. So clearly, if you understand finances, that's helpful to making a little bit of money. Okay, schools that are most represented in the pool of consultants right now: University of Toronto, which is interesting, University of Maryland, and Penn State. Obviously, there are a ton of other schools, but these are the top three. Okay, so that's a little bit about management consulting. Let us dive right into our guests. Let me bring him on screen. Dan Gordon, welcome to the show.
Great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. So, okay, you guys, we are so lucky today. Dan has done many things. So I'm going to just give you a few of his roles and past roles. So he is right now executive director of Jabian Consulting, which is an amazing consulting firm here in Atlanta. He was also past VP and chief of staff at Emory University. He was past COO at the city of Atlanta. I mean, I could go on and on and on. So we're just going to dive straight into Dan's background. And get your questions ready because we're going to turn it over to you very soon. Okay, Dan, please tell us, where are you from? Where did you go to school? What did you major in?
Sure. So I call myself a bit of a mutt because I was born in Boston, and then we moved to Colorado for several years, grew up in Pittsburgh for 9 years, and then finished my pre-college education at the Lovett School in 10th grade. We moved here in 1992. So I consider myself from Atlanta for many years now, but I really grew up all over the country, and it's been great. So all those different places I lived enabled me to meet a lot of neat people, and that's kind of a part of who I am today.
Cool. So from Boston, I don't think I knew that.
Yeah.
Okay, so please walk us through high level your career path. So from the time you graduated to Jabian today.
Sure. So I graduated from Emory University, and I had a fantastic experience there. I started my first business at 18 by getting a real estate license and working in real estate. And then I knew that I wanted to be a general manager, which means I wanted to run a company or run something. That was always in my blood, frankly, just watching my parents and grandparents, et cetera. And so I joined Home Depot in the business leadership program, which we rotated every 6 months over 2 years. And it gave me a fantastic opportunity to learn from some really bright minds across different sectors. And one of the larger deals I worked on there was a $6 billion deal in the financial services industry, helping to move the credit card platform, which is a very large moneymaker, an important asset for a company like Home Depot, from one provider to another. Through that, I worked in strategy with a bunch of top consultants and learned how to do mergers and acquisitions and grow the business inorganically. And what that means is instead of opening up orange box stores and more stores, we were looking for innovative ways to complement those stores as well as get into some new businesses to diversify our revenue mix. After that, I had the privilege of going to Emory Business School. I did something called a one-year MBA, which means that summer, you do a 2-year degree in 1 year. That summer, you end up going to school a lot, and then you join the second year class in a normal way after that summer in a regular pattern, and you get your MBA in 1 year, and that was great. It was actually a great value, and I was able to still be a part of Home Depot when I did that program. Following that, I had the opportunity to work in real estate development and work for the same folks that are redoing Colony Square, and they also did Avalon and Alpharetta. Many of you may have heard of some of their properties. And I really enjoyed that. It was the first time where I got to touch government and business working together, which came in handy, although I didn't know it at the time, later in my career with the city. And then I was recruited to work for Arthur Blank, and I got to build a company from scratch in healthcare under the Falcons brand. It's called the Atlanta Falcons Physical Therapy Centers. Got to build it from scratch, from the strategic plan all the way to hiring a big team. And we ended up selling that to a public company 6 years later. And it was an incredible experience to work for Arthur in that capacity as well, personally. I then joined a healthcare firm and ran 16 healthcare companies under a parent company. And that's where I really got to know healthcare, in addition to my earlier time in physical therapy, quite well. And then accepted a position with a private equity portfolio company that was doing a lot of installation work. Again, going back to some of my experience at Home Depot, where we did installations all over the country and had around 750 teams, and we did around 40,000 projects a year. And that was fascinating. And then all of a sudden I got a text saying, the city of Atlanta would like to talk to you, from someone that knew me that worked there. And I had no idea that this was coming in. And they asked me to become the COO for the city of Atlanta. And that means helping to oversee the airport, the police, the fire, a lot of the big real estate deals, helping to get more money from MARTA, helping to support the arts. It was an incredible opportunity to serve. So I took a financial adjustment to support, but I don't regret it for 1 minute. It was a real honor to serve. And then later, I didn't know I was going to a for-profit company after I finished my term. And the president of Emory invited me to join her team, and I became chief of staff of Emory, which enabled me to connect a lot of brilliant students and professors more with the city of Atlanta, as well as to do some neat, innovative projects at Emory. So it was great. Now I'm really proud to join Jabian Consulting. I learned of Jabian, which has been around for 15 years, in 2008, although the firm was founded before then. And I was chairman of a committee at Children's Healthcare Atlanta volunteering, and a member of that class who later became the chair of that same committee happens to be the founder of Jabian. We became friends, and it shows you how keeping in touch can really lead to neat opportunities you may not foresee when you first meet, if you do it right.
Okay, that was great. And you guys are probably as tired as I am listening to all that, but Dan has done a lot. Okay, so I'm not even sure where to dive in, but one of the things that you worked on was the big Mercedes Benz Stadium in Atlanta. One of the biggest stadiums in the country, really, and like so advanced for its time. You mentioned that you had past experience in real estate. You worked with a great company here in Atlanta, but the stadium deal was more than just a real estate deal. So how did you even begin to navigate the size of the deal that was the stadium? And like, what did it take? How did you even begin to figure it out?
Sure. Well, I want to make sure I give proper credit to the right leaders. So certainly Arthur Blank had a great vision for the stadium. And of course, the mayor had a vision as well that came together into what you see today, which is really a world-class stadium, like you mentioned. But in short, the Falcons knew that the value of the team to provide the right fan experience and also to attract the right events to Atlanta, that an incredible stadium would need to be built to stay competitive as a city. And we certainly, one of our goals was to win the Super Bowl, and I was honored to serve on that board, actually. So it first started out really more as an open air concept. And then as more stakeholders got involved, we learned that it really needed to become a larger investment, which means closed air stadium, which you see today, which opens and closes. And I mean, that's a several $100 million difference, to give you an idea. And then there's a lot of different places you could put a stadium. You saw the Braves move to a different area. Well, Arthur really wanted to have a commitment to downtown and make sure that he continued to keep that important part of our city very vibrant. So we knew the general area was going. And then you start getting all these calls. And again, it was the Falcons, and I was in a more junior role versus not leading the project. So certainly want to recognize Rich McKay's amazing leadership on that project at the Falcons. But you get all these calls from folks that are trying to figure out where it's going to go for real estate and economic development reasons. But in short, it was really interesting to see the start of that project happen there, of course, inspired by Arthur and led by Rich. Then I was a little later, I ended up being on the city side. The deal was already negotiated, but there's still a lot of work around the stadium to be considered. You think about the West Side Future Fund and making sure the economic impact of that stadium, while it creates a lot of opportunity, it also raises prices around it. So how do we help make sure that we're doing all we can to not negatively impact very important residents of our community on the West Side? So you saw a lot of community engagement work in that way. There was over 150 community meetings to try to make sure we're doing everything we can. You see a lot of parks and additional amenities brought into the area. You also see a lot of the leading companies of Georgia investing in that community that benefit from the stadium, and also just to do the right thing for equity and equality and opportunity for all types of Atlantans. The last piece I'll say is there's a lot of places where I had to step in that were intergovernmental, the relationships with the state, the relationships with MARTA, the relationships with the county. All of these things have to work together to make that stadium successful. So I did spend a lot of time on the tail end of the project trying to make sure that all those different agencies that work together go well. And that includes even the federal agencies like the FBI for security and things like that as well for big events.
So a lot of people would be paralyzed by a task that large. And I know that you were on a team. I mean, it makes it easier. That's not just you. But how do you even come up with the decision making? What is the decision making about where to start? Like, what is that first step you take to just get the process rolling?
Sure. So it's really important to really understand the visionary and who the key influencers are in the project. So you start with who's the key visionary, both in terms of influence and decision making, but also in terms of finance. Usually there's some sort of financial component in any major undertaking. And then what you try to do is make sure you understand where there's gaps and where there's alignment. And then you try to make sure that you put the right people that can work together in the right chemistry. You're very intentional about the technical skill sets, but also the personal skill sets that can work to bring things together. And then you always want to leave room for changes and unexpected contingencies in your planning. So there's always a contingency in the timeline and in the finance to make those types of things get done. But in short, I'll pivot a little bit away from the stadium in that answer and just answer in a general management sense. When you enter something that's moving already, so the city was already in place and you're having to make some big decisions on moving projects, it's a slightly different answer than when you're starting from something from scratch. I fortunately have experience from both. But let's just say in general, many of you may end up going into an existing employment environment where something's already moving. So I'll just say the biggest and most important thing is get to know the people and listen very, very carefully before you start taking action and trying to prove yourself too quickly. It's a sign of maturity. You'll learn from it. And then what you want to do is really create something called a Gantt chart and a project plan that really lays out all the key steps and then the subtasks underneath those steps and the people that might look. And then you want to make sure you understand the dependencies between the project. And then you want to privately just say to yourself, who's going to get along and who's not going to get along? Because people honestly tend to be some of the bigger risk components and how they work together, not just the other parts of the project that you need to consider. But at the end of the day, I don't claim to be an expert in anything except wanting to bring out the best in people and teams and having authentic conversations to lead teams to the right place. They might be easy conversations. They might be hard conversations. They'll always come from a good place, but you at least know where you are and how we can work better together with me on that day.
Yeah, that is great advice. And it's so true. People tend to be what make a project easy and what make it difficult. So really, Dan gave you a great piece of advice. Listen, ask the right questions because they will tell you, in their answers and really listening to what they have to say, who's going to be a roadblock or not. And like Dan said, like who's going to get along with who and really listen to what they're saying about each other and about the project. Very valuable. Okay, so you mentioned a little bit about the COO position you had with the city. What was, in your mind, the most difficult part about that job, and what was the most surprising?
Yeah, I think that I learned this working at Home Depot from all the CEOs. I worked under Bernie Arthur and then Bob Nardelli. But keeping your composure in a time of intensity. And I'll give you an example. I'm in my office. It's towards the end of the day. The fire chief calls me. I heard the sirens glaring, and he said, CO Gordon, we've got a major issue. We've got a bridge that could collapse that's under threat on 85. and we're heading that way. And then we also prepare for city council that was engaging quickly and where they could get mobilized in certain key folks. And so to me, I had to think through what that leader would, and he's outstanding. And he's no longer with the city, he's retired from the city, but he's an outstanding leader. So he had my full confidence. But I had to think through what could be missing. That was my first question. That might not be in a linear thought pattern that could help us. So I worked with some very high level federal contacts to make sure I understood the intelligence in the environment, to make sure that it wasn't isolated, but we didn't know at the time that what the fire was caused by. And so I wanted to make sure that we didn't have any other intelligence to put other agencies on notice that we might, want to be extra vigilant right now, in particular, and to make sure they were aware, since this just came to me literally that moment. I briefed the mayor very quickly, asked if there's anything I could do to support any guidance. He was a fantastic leader and support, and I'm so proud of our work supporting Russell McMurray in the state on one of the fastest construction successes in the history of the Department of Transportation in terms of the response and resilience. I will also share that we worked with other countries to understand through the resilience network that we were part of, and to understand what experiences they had. And we learned interesting things. So it's really important to talk to other environments. And one was, if you don't plan ahead during the construction for 18-wheelers that will now be using neighborhood roads, you're going to have trucks stuck, and you're also going to have damage to property and roads that you wouldn't have otherwise predicted. So we worked with Google and the trucking industries and Waze, and really brought in a lot of public and private partners to make our response very quickly. But in short, what I would say is that during a time of crisis or a time when you don't know something, think very carefully about the partners that you may need to involve, not just internally, and how that can be a part of the broader solution. Don't claim to know how to solve everything, but know how to claim how to get to the person that has the best information that can answer the right questions. So again, I don't have to know everything, but I have to know the right questions and the way to harmonize the right people being successful when you get to the senior executive level.
Yeah, great advice. And for everyone who doesn't know, there's a bridge in Atlanta that collapsed because of the fire in the middle of rush hour traffic. And so it was a big, scary thing. And the city and everyone involved navigated it, pun intended, very well. It was resolved quickly and, early, right?
Yeah, on an amazing level. The incredible work of the Georgia State Patrol and Atlanta Police Department and Fire and Rescue Department. To my knowledge, no one was hurt in that incident, which easily could have killed folks. So we did put safety protocols first, and someone was purely assigned just to safety, nothing else. So I can't emphasize enough how human life has to come before anything else in these situations.
Absolutely. And just another example of how communication really helped navigate this very sticky situation, and working with partners is a big important thing. Dan, you mentioned that you worked with Arthur Blank. You've worked with a lot of really incredible leaders: Arthur Blank, Bernie Marcus, Bob Nardelli, Mark Toro. What trait would you say they all had in common that made them successful? And how should students go about navigating how to hone that skill?
It's great. So there's a few things. There's some similarities and there's some differences. So there's not one formula to leadership. And I truly believe that leadership might come easier to some people, but anyone can teach themselves to be an effective leader if they put their heart into it and have the right mentors around them. So first I'd say working for Arthur and Bernie and Nardelli, think big. If it's not big enough, we really shouldn't necessarily take it on. So we want to transform industries. We want to really do big things that really change the landscape of business or the communities now, because they're philanthropists. Interestingly enough, many very wealthy philanthropists will tell you that it's harder to get a great return on their investment when they make it to the community to get the desired outcomes than it is in business. So I would tell you that it's not the same skill set in leadership as it is in business versus non-for-profit. That was another interesting learning I had. The other piece is that you can be self-made. It's not easy, but there's a tremendous amount of self-made folks out there. And most of the people I worked for, frankly, were self-made. Now, some had it harder than others. Mm-hmm. But I will say Mark Toro really built an incredible real estate firm from scratch and didn't have a background in it, but he was good with people. He learned, he was hardworking, had a work ethic. He wasn't scared to ask the right questions. He took some calculated risks, put some good mentors, and got an investor that really believed in him, that was able to do multiple projects. And now he's looked at as an example in the country for quality real estate development. So it was a real honor to work for someone like that. And the way he taught me was different than Arthur or Bernie, for example. He wanted you to learn by doing and experiencing versus just asking questions and getting an answer. And last but not least, a lot of the folks that I've worked for have such big visions, and they will always tell you that they're not the smartest in the room. Their job is to hire people that are smarter around them to be successful. So to re-anchor on that message about asking the right questions, setting the right visions at the CEO, that's for many people. But a lot of people are very happy at the executive or analyst or other level, and have a great life too. So find out what's comfortable to you and just keep growing and learning.
And it sounds like they were incredibly, they dreamt big and had big goals, but they enabled their team in a very positive way to achieve whatever the goal was, right? So it sounds like that might be a common thread. They all dreamt big, but also laid the groundwork in their teams to really make sure that it was a success.
I will say two other quick points. I asked someone, because Arthur's an amazing person to work for and someone I worked most closely with, what's your most proud trait of Arthur's ability to lead? And it was bringing out the best in people. And somehow he gets you to want to do so much more than you even knew you could do, and in the way he motivates you. And it's just a real gift that he has. So I just wanted to highlight that, you want to bring out, again, the best in people and the best in teams. But I will say, they expect you to know your business. If you're running a business for these leaders, they expect to give you the autonomy you need to be creative and run your business. You're an executive, but at the same time, if you're in the hallway, you should know what's going on in your business quite well. So the metrics that I, let's just say, reported out on monthly were really to a decimal level in understanding of what was going on in the business, not the 100 level, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So you've led a lot of teams, and you've been responsible for many, many employees underneath you, both in the public arena and in private business. What would you say is the skill that you think is most important when leading people, and how did you develop that? Leading people does not necessarily, or managing people does not necessarily come naturally to most people.
Yeah. I think if people know that you really are listening and trying to do the right things and have some sort of emotional connection with them, I'm not saying to be a pushover, but I'm saying that you are a human being and you really listen, want to do the right thing, that people naturally, generally do want to try to respond in the same way. I think if you're tested, you need to, make sure you're responding in a way that shows that you're a leader as well. Some people might try to see what they can attempt versus should attempt. So I think there needs to be careful boundaries in that. But in general, what I'd say is the most important thing is just being approachable at a place where ideas want to come to you versus there's any sense of fear that's away from you. But you also want to make sure there's a sense of accountability. If someone, one of the things I think managers sometimes mistake is someone may not be performing, but really understand why. Is the company not putting them in a place where they can be successful, or are they not performing because they have other things going on? And really taking the time to get 360 degrees around a situation is probably the second most important skill. I find that there's usually one side to a story, and it's very dangerous because when I talk to 2 or 3 people about it, I get a very complete picture that enables me to make a more informed decision versus just one picture. So I always try to get multiple data points and look for patterns in the consistency or lack thereof.
Yeah, that's a great just life lesson. So you've hired a lot of people. What would be your one interview question if you could only ask one? Like, what is that question you would ask?
It's a great question. I'm going to give you 2. One is the one that I would ask, and one is the one that I like to be asked.
Okay, great.
I think the first question is really understanding, why are you interested in this opportunity, and what does success look like for you in a position and on a team? And just really trying to understand that overall response, the way they think and the way they fit in the way that answer. I look at the level of detail, how organized the information is, et cetera. But I do like a general broad question and seeing where they go with it versus cornering them to a narrow question. I will say that the question I like being asked is, one is, anything about the company and how, if they like the culture, what it's like to really work there. But the real question I like to hear, if it's not asked first, is if we were sitting in my performance review a year from now, and I got an outstanding review, what would we have accomplished together, and how could I help you be successful? And I like hearing that initiative and that focus.
That's a great
I don't
question.
always expect that from out of high school or out of technical school or out of college. But I do like that at the management level and above in particular, because it shows a lot of alignment and foresight, and that you want to be successful and you want me to be successful with you.
Great question. It's always good to know what success looks like in your mind and in the person who you're working for. Because if those aren't aligned, then you're quickly going to potentially have an issue. Yeah. And it's a good way to understand if this is the right fit for you. Okay. So one more question, then we've got some student questions coming in, but I really want to ask you about board service because it's a big part of who you are. And you've chaired and been on many, many amazing boards here in Atlanta. One of them that I want to point out, though, is Leadership Atlanta. It's an organization I went through LEAD. It's a young professional organization at the LEAD Atlanta level. And then there's a Leadership Atlanta for the more advanced professionals. What is so special about Leadership Atlanta? Why is a leadership program important to go through? Like, what does it teach you, really? And then about board service, how do you really prepare yourself for board service? I mean, students are so young. What can they do to really start getting on boards and preparing themselves?
Yeah, it's very fortunate that Arthur sponsored me to do a Lead Atlanta, and then later, as you know, I did Leadership Atlanta. I didn't know why it was so important until I went through it, and I know it even more now that I've been an alum and been a chair of the board. Number one, you think you know the community issues, but then when you go through a program like this and you think you understand race, equity, and inclusion, and then when you see how a diverse set of incredible leaders' lives are affected, when you hear it from the speakers or the simulations they put us through, and then you really get a deep understanding. There's a saying that says the smartest person I know thinks they know the least that they in the world. And the point is there's so much to learn and understand in that statement. So it really provides a deep understanding of the community issues through a diverse lens that frankly I haven't been able to find anywhere else at the level except through LEAD and Leadership Atlanta. The second piece I appreciated is it's the oldest continuously operating leadership society of its kind in the country. It's been around for approximately 30 years. A lot of the top leaders, elected officials, business leaders, et cetera, are members. And of course, this amazing host is a member of our community. But what I would say is the ability to bring those folks together. There's 4,000 alum, and there's a code that you return each other's call within 24 hours within that community. The amount of good that happens for that, I'm helping 2 people get jobs that have been struggling for jobs by just making calls to them today alone. Or I just asked a major federal official to speak to our community to educate us on something relating to COVID, and they accepted. There's a certain sense of honor that it brings to Atlanta that leads to great synergies and a tremendous amount of board placements in the nonprofit community and the like. With respect to board service, there's a difference between governance and management. So when you're on the board, you don't want to be telling the staff what to do. You want to be more saying, how can I bring new peoples, more resources, more support, new ideas, and ask questions that might be missed if I don't ask? How can I make sure the right approval processes are in place? How can I manage risk and make sure the right bylaws and organizational design is in place to be successful? So on the board piece, you're really trying to make sure that you're an extra resource in complementing the work of the CEO, or if the CEO isn't performing, you're helping them be successful or making a change if you have to. Again, I'm always trying to help people before you have to make a change, be as successful as possible. But you really want to be an advocate and supporter to the board that's managing the business while you're helping to govern it. But it's very important if you ever want to be an executive one day, or as you grow in management, to try to be on the board that resonates with you, or more relevantly, volunteer first and be on a committee, and then work your way up one day to being on a board. There is a financial aspect to being on a board, but you help raise money. Just to give you one example of that, a major mentoring organization in Atlanta that you all have heard of, I just won't mention the name now, that's fantastic. I just connected 2 people and it led to a 7-figure donation just by having 2 people come together. So if you're a little intimidated to ask for people to support you, I respect that. But also just realize sometimes just putting people together and saying, would you mind learning more about this, is all you have to do. You don't even have to make the formal ask. The folks at the organizations will make that for you if you're uncomfortable. And that years later, Mike, you're not at 20 or 15.
Yes, it's really about facilitating relationships, right? I mean, part of board service and even organizations like Leadership Atlanta and others, it's about building your network. I mean, the network you've already mentioned has been such an important part of your career. So it's who you know, but it's not meeting people just so that they can do something for you. It's really getting to know them and getting to know them on a personal level so that you are building relationships that you can lean on when you need them.
Exactly.
Or when they need them.
Exactly.
So actually, Dan and I went to high school together and reconnected because of LEAD. and leadership, right? Dan actually spoke to my Lead Atlanta class, and I was like, I know him. So you never know how you're going to reconnect and these things are going to come about. And I have to ask, since we went to high school together, do you feel like high school prepared you in any way for, or our high school specifically prepared you in any way for life?
Yeah, there were 2 or 3 things that happened that might be a little unique to my situation, but everyone has a unique high school experience. I was a very competitive wrestler, so the discipline I learned through sports and on the field, really mind over matter. I didn't know how I was going to beat these folks that were much bigger than me, but I was well coached and I was very quick. So I tried to find my strengths and worked with it. But to be a part of a team and all that was really valuable for me. I would say that I ran for student body president and unfortunately won, and it was incredibly powerful because I chose to do something with it where we had a career day where all the seniors could actually work at the Falcons, at Coca-Cola, at Emory Hospital, and all these amazing brands, and really experience with a real world perspective what a day was like. So to put that program together and to organize that while going to school was really meaningful, and just to be leading in a boardroom. But yeah, it was as much the extracurriculars in addition to the academic rigor that prepared me. But I would say the extracurriculars are a big part of my education and why I think I'm there, in addition to the academic training.
Yeah. And just so you know, all of you, Dan showed up in a blazer like every day. I distinctly remember that. That's just been his uniform.
It was a uniform. At least help me out.
Yeah. Well, the blazer wasn't, but you made it part of it, and it was great. We knew you were in charge. So, okay. Let's turn to student questions because we have a few coming in. So let's stay on this topic of leadership organizations. Natasha would like to know, what are a few leadership organizations that she should apply to? So I guess in addition to lead, right?
And what stage of Natasha's education?
I think she's in college.
Okay, great. Natasha, thank you for your question, and feel free to reach out to me after today's program if I can be helpful and at more length. The first thing is figure out if you can be a leader in one of the clubs on campus, or if there's something that you want to start that doesn't exist there. I would encourage you not to start something that already exists, but more to partner in making it better, just because it does, sometimes the resource utilization isn't optimal. But I would tell you there should be a lot of great things on campus that you can start and lead there. The second thing is I would try to answer this question, and this is how I help very, very big executives figure out how they want to get involved in the community. If you had $100 million, which is very nice to be able to imagine, where would you spend that money today? That should give you an indication of what your passions are. And then I want you to look at, what am I really good at? What do I enjoy doing? Where do I constantly shine? So for me, that's not going to be singing, but I might be okay, running a meeting or something like that. So figure out those passions and abilities, coupled with your, obviously your interest areas are the passions. And then that's the right way to tell you where to spend your time versus me just naming a few organizations. I will, however, name a few organizations that are neat to volunteer at. So if there's a way to volunteer at like Children's Healthcare Atlanta, if there's a way to volunteer at Big Brothers Big Sisters in some way, if there's a way to volunteer at the City of Refuge, there's so many different areas that you can volunteer your time and really grow as a leader to help. But Covenant House does some great work with the homeless. But find out where your heart is and then go to it. Don't just go to the organization and backwards, unless you really don't know, which is fine. Then you want to go probably the organization as the next step to figure it out. But if I could be helpful to you on that journey beyond the answer to this question, through LinkedIn or through this wonderful hostess, you can find me.
Take him up on it, okay? We're going to link to his LinkedIn. So
thank you. No, I'll be happy to do that.
Yeah, okay. Brooke would like to know, what has been your favorite job?
It's interesting. I really enjoyed all the jobs I've had. It's a toss-up. I love what I do now because it applies all the skills, but I really wanted to get to a pinnacle level of leadership. And it's hard to really get to a level of leadership like you have in local government, because when you're at state or federal, it's so policy driven that you might not feel the exact execution. The decisions that I was a part of making with the mayor and others, you literally see happen in your community, affect millions of people that come in and out of the city every day. So for the time, I really enjoyed the leadership impact I had at the city. I would say I found it to be incredibly fascinating to take a concept from a strategic plan, which was just a paragraph of 3 lines, to a business and then see it successfully sold and have a legacy now as part of a major public company. So I wouldn't say that there's one, and I want you to learn from that. I hope you enjoy many stages of your career. I will also tell you, if you have something that you don't enjoy, you'll learn as much from that as some things you do enjoy, but don't spend so much time there that you waste part of your life. Remember that each year of your career is roughly 2 to 3% of your career. You can afford to make 1 or 2 mistakes, just finances are in order and your risks are smart, and never dealing with compromising any integrity. Integrity should never be forgotten.
Great point. Neil would like to know, how do you get yourself noticed by a big executive?
It's a great question. If you ask someone for a job, it's a different answer than if you ask someone for advice. So I highly recommend that you reach out. I'm not sure if he's a student or if he's in his career yet, but outside of school. But assuming you're a student, what I would do is say, I'm a student here, and I really just found it interesting to see your LinkedIn post or this article. Is there anyone you or someone on your team might be able to answer a few questions? I'd love to learn more about this area. Very few people will not at least give you a delegate to answer that question, if that makes sense. I get a few of those a week, and I always find a way to answer, usually directly, and then sometimes I'll introduce them to a friend. But you do want to be very, very careful to make sure you send a thank you note and express appropriate appreciation. And please remember, when you write a thank you note, try to reference something that's specific to that individual conversation, so that's not too generic. It doesn't look thoughtful when the thank you note could be sent to anyone versus that intended recipient.
Yep, that's a great lead into this question. Ashley would like to know, do you have mentors, and how did you find them?
It's a great question. Yes, I will always have them. At Home Depot, fortunately, you got paired with a mentor as part of that leadership program I spoke about earlier. I am still very close with that executive today. And she was the VP to the CEO at Home Depot, and I was very blessed to be paired with her. I still talk to her before considering job changes. I still talk to her on a lot of things. She's semi-retired now, but that's a 20-year plus relationship. I also fortunately got to work for Arthur, and I'm able to have occasional access. He always makes time for me, but I'm very careful when I reach out to him to run things by him or ask for his ideas or thoughts. But in short, I actually look at the situation that I have. I have out-of-state friends that are completely separate, that know me personally for decades. They can give me more personal advice. And then I have a circle of corporate friends, largely within Leadership Atlanta, that I'm able to call and bounce off ideas before I bring ideas to the board, or frankly, to plant seeds when I go into a meeting that they'll be successful for me. So mentors tend to be these experienced people that tell you things in life and shut down. And I think that's really important. But mentors can also be people that have been in situations that might not even be as high up as you, that can also teach you too. So don't always think it has to be the big title. Think about it as someone that is going to have a positive impact on your life. The best way to predict your future is to look at, or as Warren Buffett said, I think the average of your wealth is best predicted by your 5 closest people around you. So just kind of think about that circle that you're putting around you and how to get there. I also would tell you that it's okay to have 2 or 3 mentors, but to have 20 mentors gets very confusing. So I would actually tell you to try to make sure it doesn't get too big that you end up confusing yourself as well.
Yeah, that's great advice. Or if you're going to have a few more, then maybe they're specific to one aspect of your life or something, but not maybe general.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, we have a few more. Kendall would like to know, what books should I be reading?
Sure, it's a great question. There's a book called How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. And my grandfather never said, sit down and read to me. It was a big influence in my life. But he said, you need to sit down and read this book. And that is just really interesting psychology. And it really tells you how to relate to people. And I'm decent with people, so I didn't need it from that lens as much. But that's the one book I really wanted to make sure that my kids also read. And I would tell you that one stands out to me. I think it's also important to look at just any kind of book that can, there's something called From Good to Great, just ways to look at how to take something that's still good to a great level. I also lastly would say, if you want to be an entrepreneur, it's really great to learn from other people's experiences and what they went through and the level of risk involved. So I would always tell you to look at, a Neat Entrepreneur's book or something along those lines, or just kind of a book that references all the steps that you have to go through. And, Kashi's a fantastic entrepreneur and someone that I have done business with. When I hired her company at one of the companies I worked at, and she did a great job, but she's a great resource to you too. So you can put her LinkedIn profile too, and she'll take your questions.
Totally paid him to say that, by the way.
It's true.
Thanks, Dan.
Not paying, but the facts.
Thanks, Dan. So, all right. Doug would like to know, what is it like to what is it like to work on such a big deal for the stadium?
It's a big responsibility. I tell you, I felt a huge responsibility also with renewing, working with the airport team to renew the airport lease. Can you imagine if Delta, for some reason, chose to move to another city, how that would affect the southeastern United States? Now, fortunately, I don't think that was really likely ever going to happen, but that was something that could have happened. And being a part of that team is a big responsibility. So the first thing is you want to make sure that you understand the landscape and what's involved and get the right people in the room. And then you make your assessment of the situation. And then you try to figure out how challenging it's going to become. But at the end of the day, I've told this people, if you're not willing to lead and step up, you probably shouldn't be in that role just because you want the title or the paycheck. And certainly in government, you don't typically do it for the paycheck. So I, in my heart, wanted to lead and do very substantial things for my community. And that's why that job was a great fit for me. But many people did not want that job. Many of my jobs, I'd say half them, people don't want because of the stress or the level of leadership and risk that's required. So you just have to figure out what that right balance is for you. And don't feel bad if you don't want it, but do feel bad if you're not continuously growing and continuously doing what aligns with your interests. You don't want to stay stagnant if you can keep learning in some way, whatever you're comfortable.
Right. Absolutely. Britt would like to know, at what point in your career did you feel like you made it?
It's interesting. I wanted to have a certain amount of money by the age of 30 and the age of 35. I won't mention those numbers because I don't think that's the point. The point is figure out what sort of goal you have for yourself. Don't let the society define that for you. I will tell you, most people that have made a good amount of money are not necessarily happier than those that have still done well and have plenty of food on their table. And so I would just say when I reached that goal, I was really happy. And I've personally become very involved in investing in the stock markets and some other types of investments. It's been a great hobby for me, and it's been rewarding. And my point is when I felt like I could do that on my own, it was really personally fulfilling because it was something I was a little more insecure about with my own family money, if that makes sense. And the ability to see like I could grow that and for my family and children, and frankly for charity too, was very, very fulfilling for me on a personal level with the more recent times. But for me, it was once I got to an executive level and I was running a team and my own team, that was one tranche. The next was getting to a certain financial level. And now it's a matter of growing and giving and continuing to lead in ways that I think add an individual fingerprint to the society. I will say I try not to spend as much time doing the roles that I think 20 other people could do the same job. I try not to take roles that I'm uniquely positioned to do well, but I'm not arrogant enough to think that other people couldn't be successful in this role either.
Yeah, but it's about bringing your unique perspective. So what do you think you can offer that makes you special for the role? That's also a really great thing to keep in mind as you're interviewing. I mean, that's a great point. If at the end of the interview, they ask you, is there anything else we should know? That's a great point to lead with. This is why I think me specifically, I am right for this role. Yeah. This is what I can individually bring. It's such a great point. All right, Dan, 2 more questions. I think we have time for a couple. Mary wants to know, what is your biggest work from home tip?
Hi, Mary. It's interesting. I just did a study talking to 9 leading companies, includes Google, Twitter, I mean, really interesting companies. And the biggest challenge right now for people working from home, actually productivity overall is slightly up if you talk to most companies, is that you have no boundary between your personal and your work life. And the way the brain works, it's important that you give the brain rest and exercise and a chance to ideally be with your family or whatever or your roommate, whatever it is in your personal circumstance, so that you can kind of decompress a little bit and think differently and hopefully relax even. And so I think the biggest difference is having discipline around when you're getting outside very safely. I'm very careful with the pandemic, but I, certainly walk around my block or things like that to get fresh air or walk the dogs, things like that. So it's really important to not forget about the importance of personal and professional when you really don't have that separation as much due to the fact that many people are working from home. The other big thing is every Saturday, I'm a man of faith, so I try to learn something spiritual or for self-development. So I'll watch a YouTube video, I'll go on to something related to my faith and just try to figure out something that's bigger than me, if that makes sense, or that helps me be a better person. So every Saturday, that's something I do, if that helps too.
I am just not surprised at all about that. Dan is such an amazing human being. And literally everyone I know that knows Dan thinks he is an incredible human. So that is a very genuine answer. Okay, last question. And this is kind of a fun one. Joey wants to know, given Super Bowl week, what do the Falcons need to do to get back to the Super Bowl?
Yeah, I'm extremely unqualified to answer, but I will have fun as a spectator. One thing I'll tell you that was Joey.
Yep.
Hi, Joey. One thing I'll tell you that was interesting. So when I worked at the family office, which is based near West Paces Ferry in Buckhead, and then I spent during season a few days up in Flowery Branch, which is where the Falcons are based primarily, but there's also a lot of stadium operations now. And one of the things that was interesting is the business side and then the player side were like on two separate wings. And of course, everyone is super friendly, but they really are run like separate businesses. So I take very little, I have very little experience in choosing players for the team. I will say this: Rich McKay is an incredible leader, and I'm really excited about the new GM they got and the new coach they got. The Saints and obviously the Titans, and it really, I think, I mean, everyone liked Dan Quinn, and he built a great brotherhood and added a lot of intensity to the Falcons. So again, much respect for him, but it is time for this new, fresh perspective based on where the team was performing. And I think it's just going to be very interesting to see the timing with some of the higher paid players, which I'm sure you're thinking of in your mind right now, and even have the jersey numbers in your mind. How does the team stay fresh with where they are perhaps a little later in their tenure in the NFL with at least the Falcons? How do those amazing players fed into the strategy with needing to work with a salary cap? And for those that don't know what that means, is in football, you can only pay so much to the players. And if you pay one player so much more, you can't bring in other players that would require more pay. And that probably needs an adjustment to get the team where they need to be. But at the end of the day, Matt Ryan's an incredible quarterback. And I just hope he has a little more time to throw the ball sometimes. So I hope the line continues to grow. I think the running game could continue to improve, and it has improved. But we need to be a little more consistent. But and then we just got to keep that intensity really high in the team gelling. So I think you'll see some additional changes in schemes, new coaches around. But frankly, they're going to have to really look carefully at that salary cap and how to average that out across the field versus a few key positions. It's not probably ideal right now.
There you go. Y'all heard it here. Falcons, please tune in. Okay. Well, we are out of time. We could spend all day talking to Dan, but maybe we'll just have him back. And students, I really want to thank you for tuning in today. You can find everything that we're doing, past shows, future shows, everything coming up at our website, supernovacommemncements.com. We're also on the web under that hashtag everywhere. You guys know that by now. Drop us thoughts, questions. Make sure you connect with Dan. We'll get you guys connected. Our next show is Reverend Karen Webster Parks. She is executive pastor of Cascade United Methodist Church. That's going to be an interesting show, and we're looking forward to it. Dan, do you have any parting thoughts for our students?
One, thank you for doing this. It says a lot about you, and you're so respected, Kashi, so thank you. The second thing is believe in yourself. I don't know you, but I know you've got something inside of you that's special and unique. So never, ever lose confidence that you can get to a place where you're able to provide for your family, feel good about what you're doing, but just find that inner strength and build off of it, because you've got something special in you or you wouldn't be on this call.
Awesome. Well, I absolutely agree with Dan. You guys are all special, and make sure you spread that wonderfulness and special sauce all around you safely this week. But make sure you make the most of this unique time. Some of you are back in person. Some of you are still attending school virtually. Doesn't matter. Use it to your advantage. And remember, it is a blessing to be a blessing. So be kind as you go through your day today, and stay safe and healthy. And we'll see you next time. Bye.